And all right. Okay, so the objective is analyzing, generating, and managing that information. So when we have all this information, we need to put it in word order, and we need to put it in concise sentences, into interactive reading material, like papers, research, in documents, manuals, instructions, and so on. And that needs to be managed by whoever is going to manage it in companies or in government institutions. So, and also the objective is about the key findings or the results of our writing. The editing of manuals, newsletters, user guides, online help files, these things are now, you find it all over the place, because with technology today, everything is available to us. We can find documents, we can find a lot of information with technology, especially with the internet and electronic devices all over the world. So companies and individuals, governments, institutions, healthcare workers, everybody depends on these type of things. And of course, the main objective is also to find effective ways to present our sentences and paragraphs. So you can imagine, when we do a technical document, or we want to present a newsletter or an online help file or manual, we cannot use certain type of words, right? Cannot use emotive language. We'll have to use technical language. And that is what we want to look at today, is the styles. So first we look at the objectives. So there we have types of technical writing. Just to put us back into the picture, the types of technical writing, it provides detail-oriented instructions to help users. So to help users understand a specific skill, more like instruction manuals, textbooks also. We all use books. For those of us who study at university or do some research projects at university or for companies, we know that we need to use texts, and these texts need to be quite skillfully written in a technical way. Any questions so far? Do we all understand where we are? Is everybody clear? Can you hear me clearly? And is my message clear, or is there a problem with voice maybe? I always worry about that people cannot hear me. All right, thank you. All right, so the most common types of technical writing, the most common ones include traditional technical writing, and that would be repair manuals and medical studies. The other common type is end-user documentation for electronics and consumer products, right? We buy stuff all the time at any department store, we buy appliances, we buy electrical goods, and with it always comes documentation for consumer uses. And of course, the other one is technical marketing content, press releases and catalogs, and so on. So these most common traditional types of technical writing are traditional end-user documentation and technical marketing content. Let's look at it, each one quickly. The traditional technical writing, it's very broad, right? So if we have to do traditional technical writing, it's an entire series. There are loads of textbooks on it. And some institutions are doing complete courses for semesters on end, just about traditional technical writing. So what we are going to do is we are just looking at the styles of technical writing. So we have basically an overview of what it is about. Okay, so the content with this category are specifically written for professional audiences, not for any person, but for professional audiences, meaning doctors, professors, and medical healthcare workers, people who work, and of course, corporate company management teams or directors. And these experts, they rely on traditional technical writing. For what do they rely on for? For targeted research papers. right? For programming guidelines and for repair manuals. And the science and medical papers, that type of technical writing, we find scientific workers or scientists collaborate with technical writers to interpret and organize the findings. So sometimes we write papers, especially when we do term papers or research papers, we have to collaborate with the professors involved and see and interpret and organize the findings and see if it is correct. And that is also one of the functions that we have at the AWC, at the Academic Writing Center at King Abdulaziz University. And these results are sometimes published in medical journals, right? So those of you who are medical students, you will find medical journals, and all of those are samples of technical writing. The presentation of these materials, what does it require? Does anyone know what it requires? The presentation of the materials, especially medical journals, what does it require for science and medical papers? Any ideas?
Problem and solution?
Yes. Somebody said graphs, yeah. I couldn't hear that well. What did you say about motion? Okay, the sound is a bit off there. Yeah, we need to look at fine detail, accuracy, and organization. Yeah. Yes, Stephen, citations is part of it. So the material definitely requires fine detail, accuracy, and organization. And these papers act as learning resources for practitioners, right? So they have to understand the procedures and the results. It's easy just to put stuff down on paper and to type pages and pages of stuff, but it's got to be understood, right? So these resources have to be carefully written. And of course, technical writers must ensure proper credibility in the text. We also have, we usually have our workshops, separate workshops, simply just about credible citations and credible referencing and all of that. So it must be, the technical writer must ensure the proper credibility in his or her text. So the next one is professional reports and reviews. The professional reports and the reviews are important for users and for companies so that they can have a look at what to do. So we cannot communicate or we cannot actually do anything unless we have our professional reports and our reviews to see how we are doing. Companies measure productivity from these reviews. The same with government, with educational institutions like universities and colleges. They depend on these reviews and reports. Statistically, sometimes we have a lot of statistics, but we need to look at who, when, why, and what's the reason. And that is how we move the way forward with whatever venture we are busy with. So in addition also to writing scientists and doctors, technical writers assist creating reports. They have to create reports for business growth and institutions, the business, the company, and the educational institution. It has to grow, right? It has to grow from strength to strength. It's got to grow from better. It's got to improve its productivity all the time. So we have to look at that, and they have to assist in creating the accurate report for these type of things. So examples of professional reports, it would be project and business status reports, case reviews in the legal fraternity or legal case reviews, and personnel activity reports. And usually we have in every institution or in a company, we also have an HR department, and human resources plays a big role in that. So personnel activity reports, we all have a report somewhere, wherever we are working. If we have a job in a company or if we have a job in an institution, there will always be a file, a personnel activity report. In some countries, in some places in the world, they do a PDP, a professional development plan. And of course, sometimes we do a personal development plan, but the professional development plan is for the employee to submit whatever they have studied and what they have done or what the company sent them on. And that would be a personnel activity report. Do you have any questions so far? Is everybody still okay there? Everybody clear there?
How to select your case study?
How to connect?
How to select? How to select which case study exactly that is more suitable than others?
Well, of course, the first thing that I can think of is the case study that you would be the most familiar with, right? Which includes your purview of, or your field of expertise, firstly. And also, what are you going to research and what are you going to use the case studies for? So you will use the most credible ones, of course, the ones that's well referenced and the ones that's widely publicized. Was that your question about?
Yes, that answered part of it. I'm really worried if there is a measurement in which we can use to select the use case.
Well, there are cases that is, well, for case studies, there is a selection. Well, there isn't you can select those that is credible, firstly, and those that are published. But you get case studies that's not well published also. I mean, your supervisor or your research supervisor, usually the professor of the faculty, would give you a guideline. I think usually when we do a research project, we first have to select our case studies and then it has to be approved. And sometimes it's not all approved. Some of it will get approved by the faculty head of that department, depending what you are researching. Are you worried that maybe you're choosing the wrong cases for case studies? Is that what you're concerned about?
That could be one concern. And another concern would be how to measure the criteria for selecting the case study that you wish to present in your study.
The criteria the criteria is set out by the institution. So whatever your case study is, it will have to be approved by that department or that faculty.
Okay, thank you. Clear.
Okay, are we all clear there? Is everybody okay? Okay, so when we revise our drafts, check the language, and we remove any area of possible confusion, it's very easy for confusion to happen. It's easy to get confused when you read some text. I'm sure all of us have read text in our lives that we are not sure because the wording is maybe too wordy or the jargon used is too extensive. So when we revise the draft, we have to check the language and we remove any possibility of confusion. So if there's any repeated words, see whether we can change the sentence. Sometimes we repeat the same word, or even in the next sentence, we might use the same. So there are many tools available today, but also besides the tools that's available, the writing tools, our knowledge of structuring, vocabulary, and the usage of grammar, of course, it plays a major role there. So we will look at the following slides, which will help us to become aware of the difficult construction of any difficult construction of sentences. Okay, we can modify it. Any text that we write, we can modify it to ensure the reader's comfort, to make sure that the reader understands what we always keep in mind, right? Who are we writing to? Who is our audience? Whether we write an email or a research paper or just a document to explain something in it, or the minutes of the meeting, we know who is our audience and we know who we're writing to, in technical writing, of course. And then we must keep them in mind and make sure that we can modify it to ensure their comfort. So the first thing there is clear sentences. The guidelines for writing clear sentences, it has to be clear to the reader. That's very obvious, right? We have to write as clearly as possible. So the main thing is to keep the main idea on top. Always keep the main idea on top. Don't digress from it in any way. When we do technical writing, we also use the active voice. Sometimes we have to go into the passive voice, but we will come back to that again. The active voice is more clear, okay? Try to minimize or to keep your passive voice at a minimum. Parallelism, we've discussed this before, but parallelism, we have to employ it. We will go through each one in detail now. And we have to repeat for emphasis sometimes. And our sentences can consist up between 15 to 25 words. That is just an average guideline. There's no rule to say how many words your sentences must be. Sometimes we cannot help our sentences to be about 30 words. And sometimes we want to say something short. So we will have a sentence of 10 to 12 words or 9 or 8 words, right? And of course, transitions is always important. So we have to provide it in our writing. And wordiness is usually a problem, right? We cannot help ourselves. Sometimes we write too many things or we use too many words just to describe one thing. And redundancy is what happens. So we avoid wordiness and we avoid redundancy. Sometimes the word is not necessary, but we are using it in writing. It's okay for creative writing, descriptive writing, but for technical writing, try to avoid it at all costs. So the key principle in writing, we keep the main idea on top, right? So we keep the main idea on top, and the key principle in writing is that sentences should be easy to understand, and we place the sentence main idea or the subject first in the sentence that we're going to write. So the subject then, it makes the rest of the sentence accessible. It makes it easier for the flow of the reading and for the reader to follow in case of discussions with the document. And then, of course, the reader, therefore, orient themselves and they can get an idea. They find their bearings, basically, where they are, so they get a good understanding of what you are trying to convey to them in a technical document. And of course, they are able to interact with the discussions. If there are any discussions surrounding the said document, we must write it in such a way that the reader is able to interact with it. So understanding is basically the big thing there. It has to be clear. So let's look at an example from a popular newspaper. Let's just see this example here. The red is the notice, my writing, right? The white is the actual text. Doubts persist over World Cup 2007. For those who's not interested in a World Cup or any sport, they're not going to read this, right? But people that's interested in sports, I'm just using this as an example. This was probably about the Cricket World Cup. Doubts persist over the World Cup. So if anybody, a sports fan, sees the name World Cup in a newspaper or magazine, it's going to pique their interest, right? And now the word doubts. So if you see the word doubts, you think, wait, something is happening here. What is it? What's the doubt? And now the details follow. That is the heading, so the details follow. Clouds are gathering over the West Indies, and they are more than rain-bearing masses of clouds. With 8 months and a few days to go for the 2007 World Cup, doubts are increasingly being aired about the ability of the region to host a venture of such complexity. This is just taken from a popular newspaper, right? But what do we see here is the interest of the reader is captured by the opening sentence. And then you can see further in the details. Now the readers are now informed about the crux of the problem, and they become interested to read further on. So whenever we pick up a newspaper or read any news online, if we do, most of us don't, but I like to read the news. So it's a good idea of writing skills also. How the reader, how are you captured into that story? Because we look at the headline first, and headlines we know is important. Because sometimes we look at a headline and we don't, no, I'm not interested in that. But if something piques your interest, you look at the headline and you know, and the opening sentence is the important part, and the details to read further, it captures your interest. So sometimes we write a story, we read a book or a story, right? And halfway through chapter 1, and then we think, no, it doesn't really grip me. It happened to many of us many times, right? But sometimes you can't stop reading. You can't put a book down, right? You can't put it down because you don't want to stop, because it captured you, the way it was written and the words that was used. Okay, so we're just using that as an example. So the active voice, let's come to the active voice now. If we think of active voice, what do we think of? This is very basic, right? I eat dinner every day. That's very active, right? Or a passive would be dinner was eaten by me yesterday, or I ate dinner yesterday, dinner was eaten by me yesterday. So active voice is important in technical writing. Why do you think it is very important in technical writing?
Because it keeps the clarity of the meaning.
Yes, absolutely. The clarity, and also Mariam says it's easier to understand. Thank you. That is, it is there for clarity, and it's easy to understand. That's why it's always used in technical writing. So it emphasizes the performer of the function and not the receiver, right? So the active voice emphasizes the performer of that function. It puts more emphasis on that. And it also helps the reader follow the meaning quickly, and it's sticking to the subject-verb-object pattern. To stick to the subject-verb-object pattern helps the reader to follow the meaning more easily, more quickly, right? So when the subject acts, the verb is in the active voice. You understand that, right? So when the subject is acted upon, the verb is in the passive voice. So two things that we must remember: when the subject acts, the verb is in the active voice. When the subject is acted upon, the verb is in the passive voice. So let's use the passive voice sparingly and only when it's absolutely required. Example here in yellow. Is this text bright enough? Can you see it clearly? Because I think it's a bit light. If you cannot make it out, we will have to change the font, but is it clear enough for you to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Example 1, I completed the work in time. I completed the work in time. So the active voice there as the subject acts in this sentence, right? In the second sentence, my mobile was stolen. Here, the passive voice as the subject is acted upon. You see that? So we only use the passive voice if it is absolutely required or absolutely necessary, but we try to keep it to a minimum. Because as we know now, active voice is very clear and concise, and it gives the reader an easy pattern to follow when they are reading, especially long documents. Now we're looking at parallelism. What do we mean by that? Parallel structure or parallel construction. In grammatical terms, we use that. So here's an example. The vendors promise that they will replace the old machine and to attend to the new order. That is not correct, right? The vendors promise that they will replace the old machine and to attend to the new order. What is wrong with that sentence? Can anyone point out what is wrong with that sentence?
Because here we use will replace, then we use to attend. It should be all will or.
Yeah, it's right. Because the parallel structure is out there. It should all be in the same way. The vendors promise that they will replace the old machine and will attend to the new order. That's a more correct structure that we have there. So let's just look a bit more at parallel construction. So parallelism is also called parallel structure or parallel construction in English grammar. And it's a repetition of the same grammatical form in two or more parts of a sentence. For example, these short sentences here on the left side. I like to jog, bake, paint, and watching movies. That's definitely not parallel, right? I don't know why I thought about this silly sentence, but anyway, it's there. Parallel, to make it parallel, I have to say, I like to jog, bake, paint, and watch movies. I can say, and to watch movies also there. Or if I'm going to use the continuous verb, then I will say, I like jogging, baking, painting, and watching movies. So if you are going to use a verb, a continuous verb, make sure that all of it is continuous. If you're going to use a simple present verb or simple past, then make sure it stays in the same parallel structure. So there's many times that we have to look at, sometimes when we type fast or quickly, it happens all the time when we type a document or we write a paper or we write something, even an email, and then when you really look at it and you can say, oh my God, I forgot about that, and we change it. So that is where revision is very important, because sometimes we're in a hurry and we just submit something. And only when it reaches on the other side, I realize that, oh, I forgot to revise this and that. And it makes the document look unprofessional or not well written or well planned. Any questions so far? Is everybody okay?
Good.
Okay, so what we do is we repeat for emphasis. How do we repeat? What do we do? We provide transitions, right? When we provide transitions, we connect the sentences by using words that signal a sequence or a pattern. So we connect using connecting words, okay, in the form of transitions. And we use sequences such as first, second, next, and so on. Sometimes we can use then or in addition. There are many different words that we can use when we look at transitions when we write. So when we write technical documents, it's a good idea to have something handy, a handbook or guideline to look for certain things like parallel structures and transitions, how to use it. An addition and further and moreover. Moreover is very commonly used, especially at the beginning of a sentence, to add some extra information, but also to add strength to an argument or to a statement that we have or that we want to make. By contrast, we use but, however, nevertheless. Usually, however, at the beginning of a sentence, we are allowed to use however in the middle of a sentence, right? Before a comma and followed by a comma. Personally, I feel that it's better to use at the beginning of a sentence with a capital letter. And of course, but it's used all the time. It's a very common contrasting word, but there are so many that we can use. Is there anybody that can think of any other contrasting words that we can use in our writing? Somebody has a question. Do you recommend a handbook? Yeah, although is a good thing, yeah. And though. although, though, and even though, those are good uses.
What about thus?
Thus, yes, it's used often, but where are you going to put it? Are you going to use it as contrast, or are you going to use it as a follow-up? Maybe we can think of a sentence, right? Think of anything that you want to say, and then where can you put thus? You can put it at the beginning of a sentence, right? Thus, comma. But I'm just interested to know, where are you going to use it as a contrast? Do you have any ideas? No
I
ideas.
use it, for example, I use it for as why I will say this. So thus, comma, then I explain the result or the reason.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah. So you use it basically as a follow-up of what you are saying, or as a follow-up of something that's happening, right? Because the weather was very cold in the southern hemisphere, and winter came. It was a very cold winter. Thus, everyone was sitting in front of the television with the fireplace or with warm clothing. I'm just using a offhand example here, but it's used as a follow-up, like the way you said it now. Perfect. So you're going to use it mainly as a follow-up, adding something or making something stronger, or just to use an example for something that is done. Somebody said contrarily. Stephen, what do you mean? Contrarily, yeah. Usually used on the contrary. Usually used.
Yeah. I think I've seen contrarily.
Yeah, usually used like that in the chat box there, on the contrary.
Or even if you want to sound really sophisticated.
Or you can start your sentence off with that, contrarily, to show the opposite, yeah, to show something contrasting, to show that something is contrasting. So you can use it contrarily or on the contrary, showing the opposite. Conversely, very interesting word there, samar. Conversely, it's also showing something in contrast, right? Where would you use that word, conversely? When you have something that's a complete different idea, right? Sometimes we have small things like it is hot outside, but I'm walking. It's something small. And then we will use words like, on the contrary, I don't know why I am outside because it is too hot. But conversely is also a good word to use. And conversely, I will use mainly because I have a totally different set of rules or ideas that comes with. In technical writing, interesting that you mentioned that word, Samar, is that in technical writing, use it to convey something different, like a different policy in a company or in an institution. And that is always used as an introduction to something, to a document or a policy or a new procedure that people want to follow. All right. So repeat for emphasis. These are connecting words, and we will use sequence, and we use addition, and of course, contrasting would always be important. Mariam, I didn't understand your chat, what you are saying there. Could you explain to me? You are complex, nice to learn from. Oh, you mean I am complex? I hope that's a good thing. I hope it's not a bad thing. Is that what you mean? I think it's Mariam, yeah? Oh, I hope it's good thing. Complex. I don't want to be too complex. I try whenever I do a presentation or a lesson or teaching or anything It's my aim always not to be complex at all. I want to keep it as simple as possible, right? Because my thing is that people have to understand in the simplest terms, and I like to simplify things. I do have sometimes I do make the mistake of oversimplifying something, right? And then sometimes it's not good enough. Okay, we have a comment there. I mean, when we use as and just as, well, as is to compare two things. It is as big as that one. It is as, right? The Jeddah is as crowded as Las Vegas. Jeddah is as hot as Texas, for example. But just as would be just more specific. Would be just more specific, right? So it is just as, you are exactly the same as that. So you are just as, right? Like my dad used to tell me, you are just as crazy as your sister. Okay, so that is to compare specifically the two of us. Just using as without just would be very broader, much broader. Isham, is that what you, Amin, is that what you wanted to know? What about hence? Isham is asking about hence. Hence, therefore, or also used as, that is why, in the place of. It's usually used in older English, right? You will see that word a lot in literary novels. Hence this. In other words, it means that is why we say this. But it's a nice single word to use. Powerful, and we can use it, hence the need for. So we all want to do technical writing. We all want to improve our writing skills, hence the workshops at the AWC. Is that a bit more clearer? All right. Okay, the big problem that a lot of us have is wordiness, right? You find this a lot, especially in emails, and we find it with people using too many words to explain one thing. They will write a paragraph of 12 sentences, but they could have all put it into 2 sentences. It's the same as speaking. When somebody says something, they use such a lot of words. He said whatever he wanted to say, he could have said it in 2 minutes, and he spent 15 minutes saying the same thing. And that is wordiness, right? And wordiness is something that we pick up usually when we speak or in conversation. Well, of course, in reading as well. But I have this motto in all my classes. I tell my writing students the same thing, especially second language students. If you can say it, you can write it. Because with first year students, I always get the same objection. Oh, it's hard. We don't know what to write, and I can't, and I don't. There is no such a thing. I always say to the student, if you say something, that is the way you're going to write it, right? So improving our language skills, both orally and written skills, it works hand in hand. Generally, wordiness, concise expressions are more effective than verbosity. So people who use verbosity a lot, they use verbose language. They will use words that is not necessary to use at all, or they use repetition, or they use words that is redundant. So we eliminate all these repetitions, subordinate clauses, etc. We eliminate it, and we make the writing compact and pointed. Of course, we're not going to use it in our story writing and other kinds of writing, but mainly in technical writing for documentation. We have examples of wordiness on the left block. Came to the conclusion, we hear that a lot, right? We came to the conclusion that this and that and that. And an example of compactness would be concluded. Just use the word concluded. We concluded that this and that and that. That's it. Instead of saying came to the conclusion. These are just examples. Don't get me wrong. The examples on the left is fine, but it's used more in descriptive writing, not in technical writing. Good. So the technical writing examples of compactness, we wanted to make, especially with business writing and emails and stuff like that, concluded. Utilization of, just use the word use. But a lot of people have this thing, but that word sounds nice. It sounds more professional. Let's use it, right? But just the word use is very compact. Make an amendment to, instead just use amend. The committee has made an amendment to the previous meeting. Why don't we just say the committee amended the minutes of the previous meeting? All right, so we amend or make an amendment. Instead of saying make an amendment, just use amend. Make revisions. The most concise way, compact way there is just to use the word revise. Okay, you find this in lots of, I found this actually in a lot of emails and a lot of documents that I have all jumbled up on my laptop, and I thought, let me just take some of it out. It doesn't mean to make fun of it. I don't mean to criticize it. I'm just saying, technically, we can change the words to simple, compact words such as concluded, use, amend, and revise. Good. Yes, Pamela, very interesting point there. The Arabic writing is so different from the spoken form that there's a tendency to want to write differently in English. Yeah, just write like you speak. I have a motto, actually, I have a big poster that I put up all the time. If you can say it, you can write it. But that is actually, that is meant for students that are afraid to write. So I encourage them to say something and then just write it down. And that is also a good thing. So yeah, you're right. The structures of the language can be confusing. And what I feel for the second language student, I really feel for them because they have studied Arabic in detail and they've studied all the verbs and adjectives and nouns and all of that, right? The fi'als and ism and all of that. And then what happens is the structures are different. It's sometimes the other way around. I don't know if you heard, first year students, we always hear them say, street. I live in street Palestine, instead of saying I live in Palestine street, right? Because that is the structure in Arabic. In English, we have to turn it around because the adjective comes before the noun, and in Arabic, the noun comes before the adjective. These are just little examples. Okay. Technical writing, we want to reach a certain word limit without wordiness. What could we elaborate on safely? What do you mean by safely? What do you want to elaborate on? Look, in technical writing, if you need to elaborate on anything, elaborate on it, right? But you mean safely, just keep it concise, like these words in the block. Try not to add too many words to your explanation, especially if you want to explain something or elaborate on a topic or a point. Is that what you wanted to know? The question we had there from iPhone. Someone wants to know what about if they are not good at speaking, so I believe reading is the main source for improving writing skills. Yes, reading are the main source of speaking helps a lot. Speaking helps a lot. But of course, with speaking, how do you say the thing that you have read in front of you? So reading texts, reading books, reading anything, online stuff, as long as you read, it does improve. It does improve the actual outage of the words, right? I wanted to say not the pronunciation, but the fluency, rather the fluency. Yeah. It does improve it. Because if you look at the student on day one, in level 1 in English, they have never been exposed to English. I mean, there are many. Of course, in Jeddah, most of the students are quite lucky because they attended good schools, English schools and international schools, and they had tutors and all of that. But there are always students that it's the first time they've been exposed to a language, and it's very difficult for them. So if you look at the student in week 1, by the time you come to week 6, you can see a distinct difference in the fluency because the reading is improving. But that, of course, it depends on the teacher. Give that student more opportunities, more opportunities to speak in class or to read in class than the rest of them. Okay, you're talking about some in the chat box here. We have how can we avoid that? Sometimes we want to reach a word limit, then fall in the trap of wordiness. You mean you're writing too many words? A lot of mistakes that we make with writing is that we tend to count. We tend to count the words and we see, okay, 200 words, 500 words, whatever the instruction is. And sometimes we go into wordiness, but we don't need to go into wordiness because we want to reach a word limit. The idea here is ideas and facts and examples and explanations, right? By wordiness, we don't really mean if you write about something, a topic, say, for example, global climate change, and you want more words on that, and you can write a lot about it. But then you use examples such as global warming, deglaciation, stuff like that, right? And that would all be examples of what would come together as climate change. I'm just using an example there. So how do we avoid that? We avoid it by simply not counting our words, but we avoid it by making sure that we stick to the topic number 1. But in one topic, we can have many examples. We can have different examples. We can have opposing ideas. We can have contrasting things, right? On the one hand, scientists have discovered this and that and that. On the other hand, that and that and that. And then it won't be wordiness, but by wordiness, we will mean maybe in one sentence. We have too many words in one sentence. For example, I want to say something, right? Can anybody say anything? Or type in the chat box, any sentence that you want to, that you can think of. What can we think of to say something? Anything. I'm trying to think of something simple now. If we want to talk about a thing or a topic, what can we think of? What is the most popular thing or currently trending thing? Yeah, I know it's a bad time of the day. Yeah, so I'm thinking caps are not on at the moment. But just to give you an example, people use sometimes words that is not necessary in a sentence where you can say something. The midterm examination or the university examination has fortunately been or unfortunately been postponed for another date in the near future. It's a sentence, it's a statement, it makes perfect sense. But just to avoid all those words, I can just say the exams has been postponed until later, instead of saying until another date. Or
One example that drives me crazy is when people say or write needless to say and then say it anyway. Needless to say, there's no reason to say it.
I'm laughing because I have those exact words in the next slide. Yes, it is needless to say, right? You don't need to say it at all. And that's exactly the point I'm coming to in the next slide. You just made my day there. So redundancies, all right? And that you just use the redundancies. I mean, needless to say, those are redundancies. Why do people say it when it already means you don't have to say it, right? So Redundancies are words that state the same content all the time. So conciseness is achieved by saying anything only once. That's what we want in technical writing, is to be as concise as possible. Okay, so in the examples here, what is bracketed, it may be omitted. We can take it out for conciseness. There's your example. There's an example there. During the year of, so the white in brackets, that is omitted, right? During 2006. And some people actually write during the year of 2006. And there I put it in brackets, needless to say. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so of course we don't need to say it. Those in the ones in brackets. Innovation also, we like to add that, new. But the word innovation already implies new. It implies something new. So why do we write the word new? Or sometimes people say it. And of course, the other favorite one is the alternative, the other alternative. The word alternative already implies other. So these are redundancy or redundant words that we don't need in our writing. So when we tend to write, usually we write something and then we put these words in here, same like this sometimes. A good thing is to revise it and omit all the redundant words that we think is unnecessary. Right? And that way we make our structure, our sentences, our documents, we make it more concise and understandable and quite clear. So clarity is quite important here. Are there any other things that you can think of, redundant words that people use all the time? Afra, you have a question there. All skills should be learned in order to acquire English language. Which skill has a massive impact on improving language? Well, I'm taking it from my point of view. If I think that my language, my home language, I grew up with English. In my country, we all speak English, but we also speak Dutch in South Africa. And we picked up a lot of jargon, we picked up a lot of Creole words, but our professional language or our formal language is always English. And now I'm coming to Saudi Arabia, I want to learn Arabic. And for me, it is very hard. So I'm taking it from my point of view, from the way I see it on this side. I listen to people, but it's very hard to listen to it. I sometimes listen to colleagues and to students, and I'm trying to follow what they want to say. And it's not the same. It's very hard because I don't know what the heck they are saying. But when I try to say something in Arabic, it comes out slowly, but they understand me. So practice is the main thing. And listening is also very helpful. Like I always advise students to listen to the English radio station in Jeddah, Saudi Radio. It's a very nice radio station. Everything is in English. What I do is I turn my radio station in my car to Alif Alif FM, or I don't understand most of the stuff that they are saying. Or I watch the news channel in Arabia. Right? I usually watch CNN or BBC, but it's good to listen to that sound. So the Arabic words can come easier to me. And also it helps with pronunciation by listening. So there's a lot of skills that you can use, Afra. Massive impact, it would be listening, reading, speaking, repeat. And also reading out loud. Believe it or not, reading out loud to yourself, if you're alone somewhere, reading out loud to yourself from a text, it helps a lot. Because what I'm again using Arabic as an example, I look at an Arabic text and I read it out loud, and it makes a big difference whether I read it in my mind. Because I can read it in my mind, and it doesn't have the same effect. Yes. That being said, Pamela, it depends on the skill too, yeah? Yes, and for vocabulary, we always improve. We always or want to improve our vocabulary, we always read, and pronunciation, we listen, and so on. Talking about vocabulary, a lot of people, and not talking about second language speakers, I'm talking about some native speakers, they have this urgent need to showcase their vocabulary. I have no idea why. A lot of people that I hear, even back home, they have this urgent need to showcase their vocabulary. And at the end of the day, people don't understand everything or half of the stuff they are saying, because sometimes they use academic language for something, for a personal conversation. Okay, keeping that in mind, let's look at the next one. Are you all okay with redundancy? You know what we mean by that, right? Avoid it at all cost. So the styles in technical writing that we want to look at, we choose a tone. Keeping styles in technical writing in mind, the tone, it can communicate as much as the content. The tone might sound like it's not important because the tone is used for voice, but a tone in writing is also quite important. So let's look at and consider some possible tones that we can read in technical writing. So we have tones, different tones, right? The most common ones are the forceful tone, the passive tone, the impersonal tone, and the personal tone. So these 4 tones is what we're just quickly going to look at a glance to see how it is and why it is used, mostly why we use these tones. Okay, so some possible tones: forceful, passive, personal, and impersonal. Okay, so let's look at the first one. The forceful tone implies the writer is in command. The writer is in charge, right? It is appropriate when addressing subordinates, usually a company head, president, a manager, a director, use a forceful tone. Like we would commonly say, a boss, right? So appropriate is when addressing subordinates in his company or in her company. And of course, the active voice is used, and the use of imperatives, right? For instructions, especially. For instructions, especially, imperatives is used. And it clearly indicates that the writer is responsible. You are in charge, you are responsible. That's the forceful tone from a management point of view. The passive tone, again, on the other hand, is when the reader has more power than the writer. So somebody is writing to upper management or to somebody or a superior officer in his company or in his institution or workplace. For example, the instructions to implement the new evaluation system has been complied with. Then we use a passive tone because the reader is more powerful. So you are writing an instruction, you're not giving an instruction to a line manager above you, but you are giving information for what has been done, to keep it passive there. On a personal note, the personal tone implies the reader and the writer are equal, right? They are in a lateral company position, or they are maybe friends at work. For example, David, thanks for your suggestion about routine maintenance. It has given good results. These are personal things, and we use the personal tone, and we actually use the person's first name. That is, people within the same position, usually in an institution or company. The impersonal one, lastly, at the end, is when the writer is not important and the situation is neutral. So that's very impersonal. Example for that is a proposal to introduce quality control has been made. Impersonal tones would usually be used in reporting articles or news reports or events that has been recorded, right? The writer is not important and the situation is a neutral situation. We just want the world to know what happened. So that we use an example such as a proposal to introduce quality control has been made. So forceful, passive, personal, impersonal. Forceful, the writer is in command. Passive, the reader is in command. The reader has more power. Personal, it's between friends or in the same level, on the same level. And impersonal is when it's written from an outsider's point of view, just to give information, for example, a magazine or newspaper. Is that clear?
So passive tone is more suitable for academic writing?
No, actually, I would not recommend it. But you know, there are passive voice writing. In many cases, there are instances it cannot be avoided. We cannot avoid it completely. It will be there, but we try to minimize it. In technical writing, we try to minimize it as much as we can. But it's going to happen. It's going to be there. It's not going to be completely gone. Right? Do you understand what I mean? It doesn't mean it's recommended. Yes. It just means that the active voice is always recommended. But there are instances when the passive voice is unavoidable. Right? So that is what we mean by that, yeah. When you write, when you know that the president of the university or the director, managing director of the company is going to read, and you read a document that you write, or you write suggestions to him or her, you use that passive voice about things that has been done. Okay, so things that has been done. A manager, on the other hand, would use active voice, and it would use imperatives, right? Please implement the following, 1, 2, 3. And then you will reply, the following has been implemented. That's just where the passive comes in, only on those occasions. Does it answer your question? Are you happy with that? Or are you still not happy?
No, but I just wondering, because all these 4 tones, so I think now it's not related to my technical writing, right? So just something for more information, I think, because I don't need to be forceful or passive or personal or impersonal in my academic writing.
No, if you are talking about technical writing, we're talking about the different documents we have in institutions and stuff like that, and companies, right? For your academic writing, it depends what you are writing and what papers are you doing. Research papers? Are you doing term papers, theses? What writing are you doing, right? So if you use it, those kind of academic writing, the tone is also important. But these 4 tones are the most common tones used in technical writing for technical purposes, companies, hospitals, institutions, and so on. User manuals, like we pointed out at the beginning of the presentation. If you are going to use a tone, right? So what kind of academic writing are you doing? What kind of academic writing are you, what kind of academic writing do you specialize in, or what are you writing? Is it mostly research papers?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you use research papers, which one of these tones do you think would be more appropriate for you? Because the tone is going to come into play, definitely. But which tone would be most appropriate for your academic, for your research paper, for example?
Actually, if I am looking to make the reader in the first place, I have to use passive, because I wanted to provide something very clear and very useful for any reader. But it seems to me forceful is more suitable, because it is it's more suitable, actually. But passive,
yeah, go on.
But passive attract me. Why? Because I wanted to deliver something very clear, very obvious to understand.
Yes. What about the impersonal one? You want to give information, you want to convey something in your research paper, and you want to give information, right? So you don't have to use forceful. You don't have to use personal. Is not, we're not talking about that, is out, right, for a research paper. But passive, you can use it from time to time to make it clear, to make it more detailed, I think. But impersonal would be maybe a better option. What do you
Yes.
think? For a research paper, I would go for the personal tone. I'm sorry, for the impersonal tone. Okay, it doesn't mean that you are writing the document and you are not important, but what we mean by not important is that what's important in a research paper is the actual information, the research that has taken place, right? That's the important thing. It was written by so and such a person, and it has been reviewed by this person and so on. But the important part is the actual information. It has to be published later on if they decide to publish it. And there is your impersonal tone, better suited for a research paper. But you can use forceful and you can use passive in between there, but you're not going to use it all the time. Don't think that you have to use one tone for a complete document. You can change it. It depends on what your research paper entails and which sections are you looking at and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Iman had a question there. What's about using passive in materials and method part? I think we discussed this here. We talked about use the impersonal thing rather than sometimes you're going to use forceful, sometimes you're going to use passive. All right, so the positive words and verbs, we use positive words and positive verbs to convince the reader about the benefit of the subject matter. We want to convince somebody about something, a proposal in the company or at a hospital or at an institution, or we want to introduce something new. So we want to convince the reader, we use positive words all the time, right? And there's positive words and we also have positive verbs, but let's look at the words first. Advantage, effective, satisfied, value, favorable, success, benefit, asset, and profitable, especially in businesses, right? Business people that is a very positive word for them. Profitable. Everybody likes to hear the word benefit, success, favorable. We want to hear these things. So usually when you get an email from a manager, he would tell you that the report is due today. The deadline is 4 o'clock, right? The deadline. People like to use that word. Why? Because it automatically puts a negative spin on it, almost like punitive, almost like punishment. If you use the word deadline, if it's not met, something's going to happen. There's going to be consequences if deadlines are not met. But of course, most managers in the world use that word, deadline, because they have to. So these are just examples of positive words that we can use in our text. And then, of course, positive verbs are equally important. Verbs like accomplish, plan, achieve, produce, implement, prepare, organize, assess, and promote. So these are just examples of, there are hundreds and hundreds, not thousands of words that we can use. But these are just some examples that we could think of to use for using positive words and positive verbs. So the benefit, to give the reader the benefit of the subject matter. Okay, so the basic principle, effective style, we want to reinforce and we want to sum up quickly. The effective writers adjust their style to meet it, to the needs of their readers. So we need to know or acknowledge the reader's knowledge of the subject, right? We have to make sure that so whoever's going to read it, somebody that has no knowledge of that subject is not going to read it, okay? So the second one there is expectations based on specific kind of writing. What expectations do the reader have? What do they expect when they read that? Okay, so they expect something that they understand and that they can relate to or that they can use in a discussion. The third one is reader's level based on the context. Okay, the context on which they will read, under which circumstances, what is the context that you are sending that that document to them to read. So they based on the context in which they will read. Depends on where they are in whatever business, company, or institution they are in. And the fourth one is the writer's relationship to the reader. Professional roles of both writers and readers. What are the relationship? We're not talking about personal relationships, but professional relationships. Sometimes we know that those who are working under us and we are managing a team, they will read it. Or sometimes we see that people who are managing us, we are working under them, they will read it. So that is that professional relationship, right? And of course, we're going to use certain words around that effect. I think we have a question. Somebody wanted to take a prayer break. What do you say? We are not going to be long though. But if you feel to for a prayer break, it's fine by me. Okay, we won't be that long. We are just wrapping it up now. Conciseness achieved through short sentences. Very important thing, concise, to be concise. A long sentence, if we look at this sentence, the increase in the number of students enrolled in the AWC, the Academic Writing Center program at King Abdulaziz University is suggestive of the high regard in which that program is held by the university's new students. Out of breath after reading it, right? But it's quite clear. It's a clear sentence. Increase in the number of students enrolled in the AWC program is suggestive, it suggests, right, of the high regard in which that program is held by the university's new students. This is about how the new students feel about the Academic Writing Center. And it is quite wordy and it is quite long. So the shorter version of that, the growth of AWC's, of KU's AWC program suggests that the university's new students consider it a good program. Is there a big difference there? The one is quite wordy, right? It's quite long. Although it makes perfect sense, it is quite a constructive sentence, but the shorter version, taking away redundancies, taking away wordiness, it makes a sentence just powerful and concise. Does anyone else have any suggestions for the sentence? Any other suggestions for this? Anything else that you can think of? The growth of AWC's, of KU's AWC program. Yeah, there are many different ways we can flip it around. We can do many things with it. But as long as we keep it concise and to the point. So conciseness is achieved through short sentences. And the key for writing, for technical writing, is usually conciseness. Any questions about this one? Any comments or any ideas that you have? Is everybody okay there with this? Okay, so to avoid redundancy, we have wordy sentences and we have less wordy sentences. We collaborated together on the projects. We collaborated on the project. If you can see, the left block, the left column is more wordy and the right column is less wordy. So together and collaborate implies together already, so we don't need that word together in there. This is a brand new innovation. New is already innovation. We've done an exercise like this before. This is an innovation. The other alternative is to eat soup or the alternative is to it. So that is your wordy sentences versus the less wordy sentences. So the planning, we adjust our writing style to accommodate the reader's knowledge of the subject. And we meet our readers' expectations about style for the specific kind of document that we are writing. And then we determine the appropriate reading level for the context in which the document will be read. Okay, the appropriate reading level, we mean, are we writing it to a certain group of people or a certain group of individuals that is on that language level, right? So sometimes we write verbosity, we use superfluous words or highfalutin words that, and people have to go to the dictionary to find it. Say we need to make it appropriate for that reading level. And of course, we will adjust our style so that it is appropriate for the professional relationship we have with our readers. So whether it is subordinate versus, what do you call it? Executive maybe, or higher to lower or from lower to higher, that professional relationship, it has to be taken into consideration when we want to adjust our style of reading. Okay, the revision, start your paragraphs with a topic sentence and use the following sentences in the paragraph to build on the idea of the topic sentence. So when we did paragraphs, we all know, with those of us who have done paragraphs in the past as a lesson or workshop, we understand that the topic sentence is the main idea of that paragraph. Could we make the sentences any shorter? Have we avoided ponderous or impersonal language? Right? Sometimes we use these extra words that is not needed. And have we checked if most sentences are written in the active voice? Like I said before, sometimes a passive voice sentence would be unavoidable. We can't always avoid it. And of course, we write any of our sentences with equal clarity, but with fewer words. Sometimes we can write something in as clearly as the first sentence, but using less words. That's basically what we mean. All right, so this thing is stuck here. Why is it not moving? All right, there we go. Here's an exercise to look at a sentence. A stroke is an increasingly common problem associated with the brain. Do we have medical students here? Okay, so those is more appropriate for the med students. A stroke is an increasingly common problem associated with the brain. It is caused when a vein or artery in the brain is obstructed. This results in a loss of consciousness from the loss of oxygen in the brain. It's quite a wordy sentence. How can we make it less wordy? Any ideas? No ideas there? I know it's a difficult time of the day to rack our brains because we have no energy this time of the day. Okay. Any input? What do you think? It's quite clear. It gives us the message. It tells us. Delete increasing. Very good. Delete the increasingly part. Thank you, Iman and Stephen. Yeah. We can delete quite a few of these words, right? There's a very concise way of the same sentence. A stroke, an obstruction in a vein or artery in the brain results in loss of consciousness as the brain does not receive oxygen. You see that conciseness? We delete some of the words and you all guessed, yeah, the correct word that can be deleted or omitted. Here's another one. There is another method that is more invasive to the patient, but proves to be successful enough to treat stroke. There is another method that is more invasive to the patient, but proves to be successful enough to treat stroke. Any ideas? No ideas? Apart from the punctuation error I made in the writing, I forgot to put the comma in front of the word but. But yeah, I have to make mistakes sometimes. Although there's several, but it is Rokaya. Although there's several. Good. Another more invasive method proves successful in treating stroke. Okay, instead of saying there is another method, you can just say another more invasive method. So there is another method that is more invasive. That whole section can be just changed to another more invasive method. Okay, so this is basically almost like paraphrasing the whole thing. The more invasive method angle, the more invasive method used to treat stroke. Yes, that's exactly what we have there. Cool. There are many proposed solutions for ridding the United States of oil dependency. This seems like quite a short sentence. There are many proposed solutions for ridding the United States of oil dependency. So just a quick look at that one. A much more shorter sentence will suffice. For example, many proposed solutions target reduction of US oil dependency. I don't have to use the word target, I can use anything else there, another verb. But many proposed solutions target the reduction of oil dependency. Sometimes the sentence looks short enough, but you can even make it shorter. But it is not about making the sentence shorter. It is more about taking out words that is redundant and taking out words that is not necessary. All right, so maybe putting like this one, there are many proposed solutions, and just saying many proposed solutions. There is another method that is more invasive, and then just putting it another more invasive method. So this is playing around with our structures all the time, and we can always find ways to make it more concise. Yes, Mariam, or say a more invasive method. Very good. And that is it. Our references that we use were from these books, Gerald, the Handbook of Technical Writing, the Essentials of Technical Communication, and some of the websites, technicalwriterhq.com and www.confray.com. These are just some of the references that was used for this presentation and to present some of the styles in technical writing. That is it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Ridwaan. As usual, a very, very informative, very interactive, very interesting, very useful presentation. Any questions for Brother Ridwaan before he leaves? If there are no questions, I'm posting 3 links, dear ladies and gentlemen. The first one is for the feedback survey. Second is for the online appointments, and the third is for YouTube channels. Please, yesterday and today, we received a lot of messages saying that I haven't received my certificate. Remember, there are about 4 conditions for receiving your certificates, ladies and gentlemen. The first one is you should attend at least 80% of the workshop. Second is you use a valid email address. Number three is you type the email address correctly with no mistakes. And this is the most common problem. A lot of participants don't write or don't type the email address correctly. And finally, you write the name as you want it to be, and complete or full name at least. And the last one is filling out the feedback form. So please make sure that you meet all of these requirements in order to get your certificates within 24 to 48 hours. Questions to Brother Ridwaan?
I'm just replying on the chat to somebody
Oh, sorry.
about this book, a suggestion, a good book for technical writing. Somebody asked me, Noman wanted to know, suggest some good book for technical writing. Technical communication. The author, there are two authors. One is Draga S, and the other one is, but the title is Technical Communication. Oh, sorry, the essentials. The essentials of technical. Let me just rewrite it. As the title implies, there are quite a few essentials in there. Essentials of technical communication. There are many books. This one is just, it proves to be quite useful. We have used it many times for different types of segments of modules that we have done in business writing and business structures. Even people in business schools, how to use the email, the whole email and CV package that we do as a module sometimes. This book comes handy. Dr. Kamal, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How long after the presentation, like now we should be done with this one, how long after is it available on the channel, the AWC channel?
Oh, unfortunately, it's only 10 minutes for the certificates. Then for the recording, it might take 3 to 4 hours only.
Oh, okay, okay. But
So
it stays there for a period of time, right?
It stays there for long.
Oh, okay, it stays there for long.
And by the way, and we have a Google Drive for all the presentations.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've seen that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending.
Thank
and
you
you're
again.
welcome.
Thank you again and again, Brother Ridwaan. MashaAllah, you're always outstanding. We always learn from your presentations. Thank you, dear brothers and sisters, for attending and for participating and for your valuable interaction. And inshallah, next week we'll have 2 more presentations. One of them is about writing argumentative essays, and the second is going to be about writing technical documents, very related topics. So stay tuned. Inshallah, we'll meet you again on Monday and Tuesday of next week. Have a nice night. Good night again.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night. Thanks a lot.